Okay, cool. We'll start right on the dot. Hello, everybody.
Hi.
I'm Kelsey, and I'm from the podcast Tea and Strumpets. Unfortunately, my co-host cannot be here today. She has a 2-month-old child at home with her toddler. So, unfortunately, that was a bit much to try to do both, mom and come lead a panel. However, I am here, and I'm very happy to be here. So today, we're going to be talking about bringing romance into the 21st century more than your typical bodice ripper. So, I've invited some lovely guests today, so I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves. So first we have Amelie Howard.
I was like sitting in the middle because then I never have to go first. I'm Amelie Howard. I write historical romance, primarily Regency and Victorian era. I also write young adult, science fiction, fantasy, and historical romance.
I'm Jennifer Ashley, and I've been writing and being published for about 20 years now. And I write historical romance, mostly Scottish. I have a Scottish series. I write contemporary paranormal romance. I write a contemporary cowboy series. I write historical mysteries. I have 3 historical mystery series, one set in the Regency, one set in Victorian England, which is this one that's in your program. And
isn't that a great cover?
And it's a beautiful. I have nothing to do with the cover, so I can say And I also have an ancient Rome mystery series, and I have some others, but that's it.
Hello, I am Jade Lee, and I do Regency era romances, and I also am Kathy Lyons, who does contemporary paranormal and gay romance. You know, shifters who need tech support who end up being surprised. And that sounded really odd. And then I have a new exploration into children's picture books. I don't know, because maybe I have a grandbaby.
Fabulous. Awesome. Well, thank you all for being here. So today we're going to talk about what romance is for the modern reader, and especially what modern readers are looking for in historical romance, and what authors want their readers to take away, and where authors want to help bring the genre next. So one of the things that specifically, like, everyone here was brought with an intention, we want to talk about diversity. A lot of diversity we've talked about, especially in the age of Bridgerton on Netflix. You know, it's biopic, it's representation, which we love, not saying no to that. You know, people have been around, of all, you know, people are people no matter what age of history they're in. But we also want to talk about not just that representation, but also diversity as a whole. We're talking neurodiversity, sexuality, gender, identity. Everything kind of encompasses what we're looking for in diversity. So I want to talk with our panel. So specifically to you, what is diversity in romance, and what do these stories, why do these stories need to be told?
No.
I mean, I'll start. I think that I like the word diversity. I prefer to use inclusivity. And inclusivity is just, for me, a better word because it means including those groups that might have been excluded in earlier narratives or books from a long time ago. I think that for me as a writer, historical romance especially, I wanted to reflect the world that I live in today. I also want to see myself as a BIPOC person, as an LGBTQ plus person in books. So I think, you know, we have 2 types. You have, when, you know, you mentioned Bridgerton before. Bridgerton is more of a, I don't want to call it a fantasy, but it is seeing like a completely inclusive cast on all fronts on screen, you know, as it has been done by Shondaland. And then you have, you know, I have an inclusive series with Sourcebooks that is about actual BIPOC characters, like Sophia Duleep Singh, who was a Sikh princess. Catherine Duleep Singh was brown, a BIPOC princess, and a lesbian, and she lived that way until she died. And those were both in the 19th century. You know, I also have another book that's written, inspired by Diana Elizabeth Bell, who was a biracial woman who was brought to England by her white family and raised in a white home. But she was a brown woman and went through a lot of, you know, racial issues in the court. Sarah Bonetta Forbes is another one who was Victoria's goddaughter. So, I mean, I think there's two different groups, that's like two different intentions, I guess, if you wanted to say that. And I like both. So that's, I'll start by saying that. I mean,
Well, she sounds really smart. So.
I do.
Well, my policy is everyone has a story, and we shouldn't say, okay, everyone has a story, but only the elite white people get to have their story told. I think everyone's story should be told, and that's one reason I wrote The Madness of Lord Dean Mackenzie, is because I said
it's like the goat of like, you know, yeah.
But I wrote that because I said, you know, there were people in the past who were autistic. You know, it didn't just start in, you know, the 60s or the 1960s. And what did they do in the past when this was not diagnosed, nobody knew about it? You know, how would they live with that? How were they treated? How would they live like this? So that's one reason I wrote that, is because I said, you know, why should these people not have a story? So that's kind of and I like the term inclusivity because, yeah, that's one reason I started writing, and because, see, she sounds smarter than me.
But I like literally talked to her outside to get all my nerves out.
Another inclusivity I also like to cross is class lines, because again, it's like only the elites get to have their stories told, and that's why I wrote about the cook in Victorian England. She is the heroine, and you know, a lot of people say that's not realistic. Servants could never be smart and solve mysteries and things like that, and I think that's just really unfair and really classist, whatever the word term is. You know, all these people were smart and educated themselves and did things, and you know, that are not in the history books because they weren't the right people. So I really like to write based on, you know, here's this character, and I don't have to say I'm only going to write, you know, in this tier or whatever. So that's my spiel. I don't sound as smart, but that's kind of what I'm trying to say.
Set your expectations low for my intelligence. So I started writing back when, you know, dinosaurs roamed the earth. Long before we had the internet and cross-genre stuff, everything was how it was shelved. And I was told then, I figured out pretty early that there is real history, and then there was Regency history, what people read in the books. And I was told, like 23 is on the shelf, 29 is dead. And this was back when, you know, you could have a Marquis and a Viscount, and they weren't all dukes. You know, there's the, but I was told this is where you did it by white people, yet nobody cared. It was all about the reader fantasy. And so, okay, I liked money, I liked publishing, so I fell into that. Except, I don't know, the stories didn't come alive. And then my editor was at a conference, and I was telling my friend, well, he witnessed me getting a call from my mother, who was in Hong Kong. Her stepmother actually had died, but as my grandmother had started losing it, she started writing down her requirements for her funeral. Now, this woman was in her late 80s, but she wanted a traditional Chinese funeral, which included 49 days of sobbing. So my mother, who was running a business, was in Hong Kong going, in her will, she says I'm supposed to sit by her corpse in August and cry for 49 days. And I'm just going, what do you say to that? You know, and we have to bury her in, you know, we have to bury her on an auspicious day. Well, okay, but in August in Hong Kong, there was one auspicious day and the funeral home was booked up. So do we pay the extra money to like kick out other auspicious people and you know, or do we like give her an okay day? She's dead. But I'm not crying for 49 days. What am I gonna do? So he listened to me on the phone going, Mom, I'm sorry, I'm not coming out there for 2 months to cry instead of you. So he's like, you need to write East meets West. You need to do this, you know, and a lot of people don't know this, but especially at that time, you had about 7 to 10 books at most to break in with a name. And if you didn't break out into Nora Roberts type's money, or at least, you know, really show some climb there, you had to start over with a new pen name and build that 7 books again, and people would go on 2, 3 names. That's assuming your editor liked you and he liked me. So he said, take a Chinese name and do this East meets West. And I was like, okay. So then the Tiger series was born. Suddenly everyone in the industry knew who I was because I was doing Victorian set in China. I did a ton of research and I had this a tantric cult, and in fact in California, because of course California, there is a temple dedicated to this obscure tantric cult that like took my fiction books as how-tos. Okay, everyone in the industry knew me, but the public didn't buy because I've been fighting this, hey, Asian. And then if you look at me, you might guess I am not full Chinese. I am half and half. So all of a sudden I'm looking at ethnicity differently. And what part of my childhood was German, Indiana Hoosier, and what part was Chinese? I don't freaking know. But I started really looking at stuff like that, and then, yay, I'm this Jade Lee Asian author, but I'm well known through the industry, but nobody's buying the books. So then I start doing this constant dance, and then God love Shonda. All of a sudden, Shonda creates, again, it's a new Regency world. It's not historically accurate, but I love it. And people are suddenly saying, oh, were there Chinese people in the Regency? Sort of. But yes, we'll say yes. And oh, you want to read a book? My books are still about people and doing stuff, but all of a sudden I have a freedom to talk about race that, you know, okay, what if the Duke did fall in love with a Chinese woman? What now? And I get to play there, and that's, I mean, it gives me more room, and I love it. Thank you, Shonda. Thank you, all of you, for watching Bridgerton.
Well, this all brings up a really good point, and I think you all kind of touched on it a bit in the sense of a lot of internet comments, about, especially when you're starting to pull more inclusive stories and showcase them. They're like, well, this isn't historically accurate. So how do we push historical accuracy? Because let's be real, the Regency books we read are not historically accurate. Even the ones we were reading, all about the dukes and the things, were not historically accurate. So how do we...
I will tell you my real quick answer.
Yeah.
Because it usually comes from men. A lot of this, do you like James Bond? Do you think he's accurate? Shut up.
Well, I'd say that it's how do you find yourselves pushing that historical accuracy to maintain that modern values that we're looking for? Because I think all of us are looking for modern values within our books, you know, not just in the sense of inclusivity, but also now we're talking about consent and how to write consent into our books, and, you know, talking about that. So yeah.
Who started reading when it was a 45-year-old Viscount with a 16-year-old ingenue? Yeah.
You want to start? What was the question? No. Okay, I am all about historical accuracy. I research meticulously, and I wrote a book about pirates in the Regency, and I was told that was totally what was wrong with me. all of that was historically accurate. That is a very historically accurate set of books. But that was all covered. And if you do historical research, there were plenty of people of color in all of these time periods. And it is accurate to put them in our books because they were there. And I remember reading a romance. I think it was a sports romance. It was a contemporary. And I said, this is the whitest team I've ever witnessed. You know, I was like, where are all the people of color on this sports team? And they weren't there. And it's not like I just assumed everyone was right. They were all described as white. And I was like, that's not right. And when I read about, you know, the past, the Victorian age and the Regency and stuff, and everyone is white, and like, I know that's not true, and I know the people of color are not just the servants and the slaves. There were people who, they might not have been the dukes and the queen and things, but there were plenty of people who owned their own businesses. In the Regency, I think it was the Regency, there was an Indian guy who owned a string of like sports gyms where you could, and he did a lot of exhibition fights and things like that, and he owned all this himself. He owned it. Women, like if I have a character that's based on a real person in one of my Regency mysteries, who's a black woman who comes from Antigua, and she marries a merchant, and he dies, and she gets all his money and his business, and she's running the business with the money. And this happened, and these people are absent from all these books I'm reading. But yeah, they're the Regencies. You're right. They're not. What we're reading is kind of the fantasy Regency, and I'm talking about the traditional Regencies that we've been reading since the 80s, the 90s, since Georgette Eyre and stuff. They're kind of a fantasy of very cleaned up, very sanitized kind of Regency. When I first started writing Regency, one reason I wrote my Regency mystery series, the Captain Lacey Regency Mysteries by Ashley Gardner, if you want to know.
I do want to know.
I said, you know, the Regency was a really dark time. It wasn't all ballrooms and happy people in their white dresses, and there was a lot. And even if you read Jane Austen, she puts that in there. There is darkness in her books. She doesn't dwell on it, but it's there. And I said, I want to write about the real Regency. So I said, it's gritty, it's dark. There's a lot of diverse people. There was a lot more going on than people trying to get into Almacs. So that's what's my inspiration for writing that series, and I'm happy to say that's a very popular series. And regularly makes USA Today, and a lot of people really love that series. But that was my inspiration. And I've talked too much.
I think the biggest thing for me is the R word: receipts, receipts, receipts. And when I say that, I, as a BIPOC author, put it in an author's note in the back of my book, all of the research I've done, or most of it, that says, here's where these people have come from, here's where I've found my research saying that, you know, people of color existed, LGBTQIA plus people existed, people with disabilities existed. I think it's really important, and it's important, and it also feels like, I don't know if you feel this way at all, Jay, but like, when you mentioned being biracial before, I was like, it's such a tough place to be, because I always felt like I had 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Who am I? I mean, that's an identity crisis I had as an adult. Even as a girl, I changed my name in college because I felt it was too difficult to pronounce. Amelie is my middle name. Reshma is my first name. It's very Indian. And, you know, writing that in your books and putting like how your characters face the world, especially if you're writing a character of color, is very difficult. But at the same time, you're writing it for me specifically, within the rules of the period, right? Which is, yes, there is going to be a lot of racism, there is going to be a lot of sexism, there's going to be a lot of other things in the courts. Jennifer was just talking about like some of the other areas of the Regency, which I think is like fantastic, because that is where you saw more of those things. In the court, yeah, it was super white. And the people that recorded history, there's a quote that's attributed to Robespierre that history was written by the victors, and when you think about it, it is true. It was written by people who wanted to reflect what they saw. What I'm trying to do as a BIPOC writer is saying there were other people in these time periods. I'd like to center them in my stories. And there's, we kind of all touched on it before, there's two different kinds, right? There's the one where, let's just like this book, for example, Queen Bee, is completely like Bridgerton. It's Bridgerton meets the Count of Monte Cristo. Everybody, it includes everyone. That's a fantasy, that did not exist. But there are other books, this one, I talked about you being the goat of like, writing about a character with mental disability, which was phenomenal. I mean, that really informed, like, the guy in this book is neurodivergent, and my son is neurodivergent, so like a lot of it came through when I was writing the book. I didn't intend to, but Jennifer's book like had stuck with me for years, and I was like,
yeah, it was because of her book that I wrote, Lord Seder, with a neurodivergent.
Yeah, you want to make sure that the representation. Right? Here, take this. God damn it. The representation, I think, is really important. And I always say, like, I'd like to see more stories. And the more stories we see with, including other minority groups, the better it'll be, I think, for everyone. I, as a person of color from the Caribbean, will I make mistakes? Absolutely. What my experience was growing up is going to be very different from a person of color who grew up in the United States, who grew up in India, who grew up in the Middle East. But I want more stories. I want more people to write, about their own experiences, their own cultures, bring them to the page, and then, I think that's just better for everybody.
Well, it's the readers that are really driving this, and also the internet. So people growing up, you can't expect the 12-year-old who has just discovered historical romance to actually figure out what the real history is. She just wants to read a book. And so if the major traditional publishing all says, no, they have to be all white, blah, 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 because no one's going to read a gay person, or no one's going to read a black person or an Asian person, then that's all they see and all the 12-year-old believes. Thank God for the internet. So now, now we can say, oh, well, this person wrote a neurodivergent hero, and it was amazing, and readers loved it. And all of a sudden, traditional publishing and internet readers are going, ooh, I like that. Are there more? I had quite the mental breakthrough. It happened to be before COVID hit, but it kind of merged right in, where it occurred to me that I don't have to write. I'm very lucky. My husband has a fantastic job. I do not need to write for money. So all of that, trying to go through traditional publishing and pushing my stories or whatever, now I just decided, I have Dragon Blade loves me, thank you. They will publish the story I want to write. So if I start cutting off the thought of, will the readers find it? Will they accept a neurodivergent heroine? I just wrote it. And, oh wait, people liked it. And so now I have stopped trying to find, because traditional publishing, it's mass market. So they are trying to hit the #1 most readership with every book. So the more you do neurodivergent, the more you do by the different ethnicities, that's narrowing up the readership. I was recruited into Harlequin as Jade Lee. And then 6 books in, Brenda Chin called me up and said, marketing believes the Jade Lee name is tainted ethnic. And I said, well, it is an ethnic name. And she said, yes. So take a girl next door name, to which I translated as white as Wonder Bread. I became Kathy Lyons, and even when the cover treatments were all blonde, didn't matter. They saw the Jade Lee name, And you know, Harlequin does not want to publish books the readership isn't going to buy, and I wasn't making money on it, so I became Kathy Lyons. And you know, the people who read that line, it was the Blaze line, I kind of imagined that these are women with, you know, X number of kids, and they don't want a book that expands them. They just want a romance, you know, that they can read quickly. So great, we went to white. I became Kathy Lyons. Fine, but now if I'm not chasing becoming Nora Roberts, who was, you know, I'm not stopping it. if I stop chasing readership and trying to hit the broadest, I can just tell my stories, and all of a sudden, yay, you know, if I write it, will the readers come? Okay, sorry.
It's okay, it's great, I love it.
I just
women
whispered
unite.
a tough woman also. I was so joking say that. It's like, yeah, I mean, my husband has a good job too, so I'm like, ugh.
Well, and you know,
We're all not 400 books.
I did
Superstars.
Ian Mackenzie.
She's gonna leave here being patted so much.
She also works really, really freaking hard, and I work hard, but not really, really freaking hard. So,
Sorry. Well, I guess, you know, and talking about, you know, the richness and expanding what you can write and not worrying so much about the readers, I think that in, you know, writing it, in fact, now we're seeing that people are asking for more of that, like you said, like they're looking for it. You know, when I read a book that's just the typical, you know, white on white, Duke meets girl, Duke meets lady, I'm like, okay, but I've read this one before. What makes this one different? You know, and so in one of those things too, unfortunately Kerrigan Byrne couldn't be with us today, but you know, one of the things that she does really well, and also I love, of one of my favorite books of yours, Jennifer, is The Seduction of Elliot McBride, and his you know, journey through PTSD, and how we can take trauma that people experience in real life on a regular basis and how we can weave them into our stories to build a more richer character. Would you say that that's been, like, you know, and it's not, again, it comes back to that consent, where it used to be the trauma was perpetrated by the hero, you know, almost at the beginning in those old school bodice rippers, versus now we're seeing the hero is helping the heroine, or vice versa, overcome the trauma, or at least make peace with the trauma. And I think it's the make peace with it that I personally find the most interesting. But would you say that's allowing, like, again, do you feel like those stories make it richer?
I think the market's moved beyond that. So
yeah,
Mary Jo Putney talked very much more intelligently than I'm about to about the rape culture and the, you know, in the 60s when women were very uncomfortable with their sexuality. All those bodice rippers became popular because it was, you know, a woman being forced to enjoy her sexuality. Well, when finally women's lib took hold, all of those, the worst of the rape culture, which is really how many continents can your heroine get raped on and enjoy it? that thankfully just went away. So that rape culture started fading. Well, now, but we still had heroes who were, you know, the asshole, it's not the alpha male, the alcohol, thank you. So, I mean, that was still very strong in paranormal. So then you get the heroines with the heroes who are helping them past trauma. Yay! I've done a couple books now. My Lion's Den book, the latest one, Lionhearted. The heroine was, because they wanted Chinese, so okay, and I was very happy to do this. She had a very miserable experience being brought over to England. It was very unhappy, but I didn't want to make the book about rape and what I didn't want to make the book about that. And I just gave her time to process and deal with all of that. So the hero had to be gentle and understanding, but I didn't dwell on the trauma. And it was, so now we've kind of gone to, the hero acknowledges the trauma and is there to help, but, you know, first of all, doesn't increase the trauma. And second of all is, you know, I don't have to live in that trauma place. So I, you know, now, again, God bless the internet, I think we, you know, if you are in a place where you need to read a book recovering from trauma, they exist. If you want a book where, okay, maybe she's got an ugly backstory, but we're not dwelling on that, you've got it. And yes, you can find alpha holes and the rape culture if you look in the right places, I'm sure.
I was going to say something intelligent, but I put my heroes through hell, so that's my thing. But I've, in my books, ever since I started writing historical, my books were always about consent. I've never been comfortable with, and the unfortunate thing about the bodice rippers from the past, and I totally agree with what you said, that Mary Jo Putney said, that it was a fantasy for people who were not comfortable with their sexuality. The unfortunate thing is that has stuck. So when you read, tell someone you read a romance and they don't know about romance, they immediately think you're reading a rape bodice ripper, and why would you read that junk? So that unfortunately we have that stigma that hopefully we can overcome. But everyone here knows what romances really are about. And I have to say that when I wrote Ian Mackenzie, I was not thinking, ooh, I'm gonna write a neurodivergent hero and make it popular. I'm gonna do this. It was just a character. He was just in my head. He did things, and I said, I've got to write this guy down. His whole family was in my head doing things. So I said, I got to write these books. And I had no idea that anyone would like them at all. I didn't think anyone would like this book but me. I was like, I like Ian. He's not the alpha hole. He's not the big, you know, arrogant, his brother was, but he's not the big arrogant hero from, you know, that I was supposed to be writing. And I said, no one is gonna like this book. So I was flabbergasted when that book came out and people liked it, and people really liked it. And I was just I just remember sitting at my computer watching a site that had reviewed it and all the comments, and I was just going, where did this come from? I had no idea. I was just, my jaw was like on my chest. So I don't know what my point is here, but I don't know what my point is. I'm sorry, but so I'll stop. But anyway,
You just write people.
I just write people, yeah. Which
I think all three of us are gonna say.
yeah.
Well, and
oh,
no, it's okay. But I think, you know, what you're saying is if you wrote a character you liked,
Yes.
Yeah.
that you didn't expect everyone else to like, and it
Not
turns
at
out
all.
everybody loved them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And but I think it's just
Yeah.
to the point is you were writing a person,
Yeah.
and people identified with a person with real problems, like
Yeah.
real things they had to do, real
Yeah.
just parts of them that couldn't necessarily be explained, but they learned how to live a life and live a full life with
Right.
it. And I think that's all we want to see
Yeah.
from
Yeah. And
romance novels is characters living their full lives.
right. And I also say everyone deserves a happily ever after. I know in real life not everyone gets it. I mean, I do that. We all know that. But that's another thing I wanted. I wanted to show Ian finding someone that matched him, and he got his happily ever after. But I was also frustrated with books that they would get the happily ever after and that would miraculously cure them.
Oh.
They would suddenly be a normal person. And you know, what is a normal person? I don't think
Doesn't exist.
probably none of us consider ourselves normal. And if you do, you probably don't belong at this conference.
We'll convert you.
I think the beauty of romance is the safe space that it represents for you to find anything you want to read within its parameters. You know, if you want to read about the alpha holes, if you want to read about something that is traumatic, and you know, I mean, authors have started, and publishers especially have started putting content and TW warnings in front of their books, which I think is, you know, I mean, it's important. If people need a warning on what they're going to encounter in the book in terms of the story, especially if you feel like I've been a victim of sexual assault, I mean, stuff like that. I'm different because it doesn't really bother me if I read it. Like, I've read a lot of those books with the rape scenes in it. It's not been like traumatic, but for other people it might be. So I think, you know, TWs and CWs are, if they're informing you of what's in a book, contents book, it's good. But what I think, you know, what I loved about Ian McKenzie is, you know, he was so complex. Like, I know that you didn't even set out to write an ND character. I didn't as well. It changed in the middle when I was like, basically making him into what my son is 16, and I was going through a lot of therapy for him. He is clinically depressed, anxiety, neurodivergent, like he has a slow processing speed, genius level smart, and he is the most difficult, infuriating person on the planet. But his capacity for caring when he's not being a complete dick is awesome. I was like, you know, this guy, he'll be like a wonderful partner to somebody someday far away when I can't see it. He was really informing this character in the same way, like, you can't fix a person. And I also like reading, you know, but I dislike reading about books where, you know, you have a character that's miraculously fixed by someone, because that's not going to happen. You have to fix yourself. But the fact that they, you know, at the end of the story, live with their challenges, learn to, you know, they're loved for who they are, like the whole package. We're all flawed. And seeing ourselves reflected in books with all those flaws, I think, is what makes the reading experience richer.
It's interesting that we're talking about that too, because just now I was thinking about it, and I'm thinking about a lot of books where you have characters where, like, you know, they're not magically healed by the end of the book. Like, I think all of those, and like a lot of those even in the past when those weren't typical, like they weren't in the mainstream, all of them became really, you know, huge, like, successes. I'm trying to think, is it Lord of Scoundrels, where he's like mute and he's having literally to relearn how to talk? You know, like
there's a lore.
Yeah.
Flowers from the Storm.
Oh, that was sorry. That was
Yeah.
Flowers from the
Yeah.
Storm. That was a different one.
Yeah.
Sorry. Too many books in my brain.
Or Kinsale.
Kinsale.
Yeah, Flowers from the Storm. Thank you. Never asked me a book I never remembered off the top of my head. But yeah, so Flowers from the Storm. You know, that was really good because he suffered, you know, major head trauma, couldn't speak, and like slowly.
Well, and she was a Quaker too.
Yeah.
I
And that
had
was a
read
religious
Regency
aspect.
all my
Yeah.
life, and then all of a sudden it's like, we have a Quaker heroine?
Yeah, but they were there.
They were there.
And, you know, and I think that's, you know, and I think Flowers from the Storm, when I've spoken with a lot of authors, that book gets brought up a lot. And it's so interesting because it's not, you know, the books I think that we recognize are like Ian McKenzie. You know, it's characters that we're able to identify with. And it's, so now I think now we can look at those books, and they've always been there, but now we're seeing that readers saying like, no, I want more of these. And I think that's allowing for this trend to go forward.
I don't think people realize how far the industry has come in a very short time. I was at an RWA conference where the big scandal, and yes, I'm old, but if the big scandal was a Harlequin book where the hero is in the shower thinking of the heroine and he jerks one off. Men masturbate. Heroes masturbate. I mean, this was huge. And I'm also reminded there are still societies and cultures throughout the world. The rape culture is still very strong in, you know, mainland China, that a lot of their entertainment still has that rape alcohol culture. Well, and, you know, our books maybe push a little bit. So no matter where you are on the spectrum, there's going to be a trope or a feeling or a story that you just really gravitate towards at that moment. And reading these books, when I was younger, I mean, because I was raised Asian, and some of that, you know, rape culture, that, you know, getting raped as part of the price of being female was part of that. And to see, oh wait, she was raped and she got beyond that, or maybe heroes don't treat people that way. Just, you start out reading one type of book and it stretches, and you go, oh, that's possible. And then, you know, once you get comfortable there and do the processing, you go to the next. And you just, to have books at every level of cultural and human development, so, you know, however PC you want to go, I want to have books there so that someone who needs it can find it and get stretched just that little bit.
I would say two things. One is that, speaking to how far the industry has come, like in the last 20, 30 years, and I've seen it. I remember when I first started writing, when I was writing Regency, I wanted to write a woman of size, not tiny. I was
rail thin. She had to be rail
thin. She has little tiny hands. Okay, I've got giant man hands here. But, she just had really tiny, and the guy was always going, she's so tiny, she's so little, she's so thin. And I'm like, okay, I am a large woman. And actually I used to be larger than this. And I was like, where are they? Every woman wasn't skinny, so I wanted to write a plus size heroine, and I was shut down like that. It was like, oh no, they've got to be thin and petite and everything. And even when I started writing a contemporary, I was going to say the woman was size 16, which to me is skinny, because I'm way bigger than size 16. And my agent said, oh no, if she's born a size 8, we can't do it. And I was like, seriously? But thank God people have started writing heroines of real shapes and sizes. So that has changed. I mean, because I could not write anybody bigger than a size 8.
But it's funny, if you look at all the art from the period, all the women are full figured.
Oh yeah, they really are. And it's very strange. So, and the second thing I want to say is I was at a RWA conference probably 5 years ago. I think it was here. So it was the last time I went to RWA. But anyway, I was at a meeting of some kind, and I looked at the woman beside me, and she was just this nice woman with a hat. And I looked at her name tag, and I said, "You're Laura Kinsale!" Oh my God! And I had a big fangirl meltdown in the middle of the meeting, and someone was speaking, and we were supposed to be quiet and attentive. I'm
fabulous. Sorry. I got wrapped up in the story. I lost my own train of thought. But no, I think that's it. And I think to the point about exploring the sexuality and like being the scandal of having a male jack off.
And that was, of course, before Laura's Cave hit the scene.
Yeah,
boy, that was a huge.
Yeah, but I think it's very interesting to see that, because I will say in the books that I've been reading a lot have been, it's interesting to see how female masturbation has come on the rise as in the books, which I think is totally normal and totally great, but it's one of those things where it's like you didn't see it, and now I'm starting to see it more and more. And in fact, I remember don't ask me what book it was, I can't tell you. I remember reading very distinctly in the book, and the guy asking, he's like, well, have you ever touched yourself? And they're like, what? No, I couldn't do that,
Lies.
It's just really interesting as far as instead of having sexuality forced upon the heroine, it's now almost guiding almost, and the approval. And I will say, even just from my own American, middle class background, sexuality was still very repressed, it wasn't something to talk about. And in fact, and then I had issues, and then having to have that conversation with my husband to be like, look, it's not you, it's actually me, but there's a physical barrier here, that we need to explore, and we need to figure out a way around it. That for me, it was difficult. And I was like, why is this so hard? I read romance novels all day long, but actually talking about my own personal sexualities, issues, that's so difficult. So reading it in the books now and having that be so much more mainstay is actually great. It's almost freeing. It almost gives me ideas of how to approach a conversation.
I think a lot of romance writers, in all of the, subgenres, are writing about female agency and motivation and being able to ask for what you want in a book. And for readers, like you, like me, you look and you're like, oh, I can ask for that, or I can do that, or I do see myself in this, or I shouldn't be afraid to say, this is what I want. this is also what I don't want. Goodbye, sir. Toxic relationship. I don't need you. But you know what I mean? I feel like there's a lot more of that, and also that's a shift in, you know, like you were talking about before, it's a big shift from where we were to where we're going. I mean, the authors, you know, are writing more of like what serves, well, women and mutually beneficial relationships, or, you know, whatever that is.
When I started out, of course, you know, all the covers were with the big busty women or the dress falling off. And I remember going, why? I mean, I don't need to see a half-naked woman.
I do.
And
I mean, equal opportunity.
Okay, fair. But
I've also been married for a long time, so I don't know, I like everybody.
the author sold to an editor who published the book, but the publisher sold it to a distributor, and the distributor sold it to the bookstore. And all the distributors were men. And so they would not, women knew what a romance was, and they would find it no matter what was on the cover. But the distributors would not pick up the book unless it appealed to them with half-naked woman on the cover. So, there's a lot that I think is wrong with the internet. You can find pockets that I think are very, very unhealthy, but thanks to the ability to self-publish and to small presses like Laura's Cave, all of a sudden we can explore all sorts of different things.
Well, you're seeing a lot of the stuff where like traditional publishing was very narrow, where they were saying this is what you need to write, like Jennifer was talking about before. Like if you don't write that, we're not going to publish you. With small presses, indie publishing, you're seeing all of that, and the bigger publishers are now saying, oh, where is all those sales coming from? Because guess what? Readers are buying those books. And they're trying to
That's what happened with the Laura's Cave. And Laura's Cave suddenly started bringing in tons of money, and and editors were going, do you know about this erotic thing? I have a book. It's basically the training of a courtesan. It's called Devil's Bargain. And I wrote it, and I sent it to my agent, and she said, look, it's a really good book, but there's no market. It's not my word now, it's not skanky enough to be what was erotica of the time, and it's not genre romance. There's nowhere for it to go. So we sat on it for 5 years. That was all it took. I mean, and actually it took less. And by the time the book came out, it wasn't even a 5-flame read, it was a 4-flame.
Yeah.
But still one of my bestsellers. It is about the training of a courtesan, but they don't actually make love until the last 20 pages of the book. And it's just all about the rise of sexuality, and yeah. It was a good book.
Listen, I have a guy playing a woman like a cello in this book, and somebody gave it 2 chilies. I was like, that's more than 2 chilies.
Yes, what was considered really steamy 15 years ago is now considered fairly vanilla. And that is interesting to me. Because I write on the hot side, and I used to be like, oh, your book's way off. And now they're like, oh, they're kind of steamy.
Yeah, so
Well,
okay.
it's no cello.
It's a Stradivari.
So taking it into the future, I guess, you know, like we've seen the trends and we're really happy where things are now, but obviously if we want to continue it, how do we, as readers, how do we support authors who are writing those inclusive stories, those different stories that we want to hear? How do we encourage the changing of the publishing industry in order to allow those stories to be published?
That's from dollars.
The joy and the sadness of it is the reader is always right. I mean, they vote with their dollars, and so when Harlequin says Jade Lee is tainted ethnic, they knew their audience.
I don't like that, it hurts me.
I mean, they knew their audience, and so it's, do you want to sell through the traditional route? Then you've got to stay within their rules and play to their audience. Do you want to go to indie? That's a hard row to hoe, and you got to do all the marketing and everything yourself, because at this point you got to make noise, a lot of noise, in order for anyone to notice. But if you like, the audience is always right. So if you want to see more transgender books or more gay books or more, Asian, Caribbean, whatever. If you want to see more of it, buy them, read them, say, "Oh, this is a good book."
And I feel that's definitely shifting, because you look at, you just said that before about the ethnic thing, and I remember I submitted a book out for editors in 2012, and it was about East Indian mythology, and one of the big six at the time said it was too exotic, and that's from 2012. And we look at 2022, and everybody's like, give it to me. We want like more. So that's like readers, as you just said, buying the books, demanding the books, asking for the books.
The trolls if you can.
Yeah.
You
Well,
can.
yeah.
Sorry.
I was gonna say, I think one of the best things that's happened to the industry is indie publishing, self-publishing. I am so happy that came along, because the publishing industry, even though it has changed and it has grown and has learned lessons, they usually take 5 to 10 years longer than the rest of us. And they still are publishing a very narrow niche. And when I know people who are trying to break in to New York publishing, I say they have this window. If you are outside that window, no matter how beautiful and wonderful your book is, they will not buy it, because they want this. And they're going by the booksellers who are saying, this is going out of our stores, flying out of our stores. This stuff is not, don't give us any more of that, okay? So indie publishing has let authors explore things in a way that we have not been able to before. Because if you want to write something that only 10 people are going to buy, that's going to be out there for people to discover. I've met authors who started indie, who've never been traditionally published, who are doing phenomenally well. I mean, I admire these women, because they write from the heart. They write, I can't think of any examples right now at all. Because,
Authors?
Yeah.
Lucy Score's a big one.
Lucy Score, yes, she's a big
enormous right now.
Yeah.
Mary Farmer.
Ivy
I just
Smoke,
thing.
Mary
Ruby
Farmer.
Dixon.
Yeah, Ivy Smoke, a couple of.
But that's Ice Planet. Ice Planet did it on TikTok.
Okay.
Somebody put me on TikTok.
Wasn't there a panel about that?
It was.
But anyway, I think indie has let people who their voices would never be heard, and it's really helped change what people want to read. It's let people of color have a voice and publish things that, it used to be, I would go to a Barnes and Noble, and like, there would be for authors of color, there would be like this rack in the back by the bathroom, and it wasn't even facing the bathroom, so people coming out of the bathroom would see it. And you got kind of pushed into this little shelf over here if you were published at all. And now, you're just out there. And I think it's just fabulous. And I also love it because I've done very well indie, so I love indie publishing.
And even with traditional publishing, you have like, people don't realize, they're like, oh, I've had somebody tell me you're so lucky to be a POC writer. Hang on.
Yeah.
If you're in traditional publishing and they've already bought a book by say a black author, and they're like, well, sorry, we have this book about this, and that's our quota for that. I mean, it's a real thing. Indie publishing doesn't allow, you can do anything you want, and like Jennifer said, there's some excellent books out there.
Oh, yeah.
I do have one negative. I think there's been a little bit of an overreaction. So as a half Chinese woman, I'm only allowed to write Chinese.
Yeah.
I'm not allowed to write Native American, no matter how much research I do. They're just, and I say not allowed. Traditional publishing won't take. If I wrote something Native American, and maybe I have a ton of experience, and or a PhD or whatever, I don't, but let's say I did, and I wrote it and I took it to New York. They're like, well, you're not Native American. Unless you can be Native American, we can't publish this book. Okay, no problem, I'll do it indie. But even then, I'd be afraid to do that. I have seen Twitter mobs decimate someone's career for no reason and for wrong information. And it's just,
There's a lot of questions about, are you the right person to tell this story?
Yeah.
And then you have to come back and say, well, here's my entire identity. And that is very unfair to ask of a person to say, open up your entire who you are and show it to us.
And there's still going to be someone who attacks you. This is learned early. A, don't read the reviews. Don't respond. It's the don't respond, because the mob in general, gross history, gross exaggeration alert. The mob always overreacts, and so Twitter PC mobs are real.
Since we have a little time left, are there any questions? Does anybody have any questions they want to ask?
Just
Yes.
one simple question, or maybe not a simple question. How, either as a published author whose book is not being pushed by the publisher, or as an independent author, do you get your name out in front of people? Does that include things like reviews from decent reviewers, and not just, because I've seen reviews from people who should not have been reading that book to begin with, because they obviously don't like that kind of story. How do you do that? How do you get through that?
When you guys find out, tell me.
I think for traditional publishing, trade reviews are a big thing, especially when you get into libraries, schools and stuff. As far as like putting yourself out there, if your publisher's not giving you the publicity dollars, or they decided to put it, because that has happened, they'll pay in advance to somebody, and then somebody else will come in with a book deal that has a movie attached to it, and all the publicity goes there, and your book will just tank. And all you can do is, go do conferences and school visits, and, if you write YA, or, get online and try to learn how to do TikTok, how to, I really dislike social media, so I tried to do only promo on it, just because it was very hard to separate who I was and care for my mental health with social media. But I mean, I feel like there is a lot of onus on writers to be out on social media to promote ourselves, and it is hard. It is very, very hard.
Yeah, it is hard. I've learned how to be, what people see on social media and what my life is are two different things, I mean, it's not, I'm not like making up a persona or making up a name, or, the weird things like that, but I've learned how to keep a little distance there. But yeah, authors, we have to tell people that we have a book out, in any way we possibly can. And I was amused one day. I did an ad, a Facebook ad for my Gladiator mystery, and the whole ad is picture of the book cover, and it says, "A free gladiator solves mysteries in ancient Rome." That was it. And then here's a link where you can go to. I got this comment that said, it was a little meme, and it was a picture of, the galaxy or something like that. It said, note to author, when we finally reach the center of the universe, you're gonna find that it's not you. And I was like, wow. What?
Wow.
I was just very puzzled. I was like, what? Should I not tell people?
You should have just said lies.
I thought that was really bizarre. I was like, it's a cover of the book with a little tagline, and here's a link. I said nothing about me, nothing about anything. It was very
It's more
weird.
about them.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I know
Yeah.
that. I wasn't upset. I was just like, why would someone think that? That's very strange. Like, I shouldn't tell people. I should have a book out and go, nobody should know about that.
And the funny thing is, in indie publishing, because I've done Sky Warren's Romance Off the Mastermind, which is like a really big craft course, and she's phenomenal. I've taken her ads courses. If you're in indie publishing, ads is the way to reach an audience. And I have listened to like Ivy Smoke and people who are much better at it than me. This is a business for them. So they run stuff, it's aggregate, right? So you start small if you do like $50 a day on ads, and you can grow really big. But if your ROI, return on investment, is 4 times, it's a no-brainer to do. And then you reach a bigger, and then the algorithms for Facebook and Amazon kick in, and then that just starts to build and build and build. That's how they make their money. I mean, it's incredible.
So when I started back in the dinosaur age, I was told, look, yeah, but You've done better. Okay, so I'm an extrovert. I love coming out to conferences. Say in the 200 people who are here, I impress the hell out of you, and you all run out and buy my book. Yay! That's 200 people. Where I could be sitting at home writing my next book, and would that time be better spent on my next book? Maybe. Or do I want to, like, I mean, you can't just learn Amazon ads and have money fall, well, some people can, but I cannot, have money fall at your feet. There's, you know, there's Facebook ads, there's Amazon bags, there's Instagram and TikTok. You just pick what works and pray that someone reads my book and likes it and tells their best friend, because word of mouth is still the best way. And so it depends on if you want to make $1 billion, and you really need to invest the time and energy and to learn at least one market penetration, and or you could be me, just, you know, saying, I'm really good, please read my book.
I mean, a lot of it could be luck too. I mean, look at Shondaland. She went in an airport and picked up that book, and that's how Bridgerton happened.
Yeah.
You can also approach your friendly podcast hosts.
Was he a plant? Would we
No.
three of us should have been saying, damn it, podcast.
No, but I mean, it's the same thing here, you know, like as we are solely a review podcast. We love to have discussions with authors. We've done some debut. We were lucky to talk with Evie Dunmore when she first debuted her book, and it was just like, you know, we got some buzz. And from us, our point of view, we just reached out to her. A lot of our interviews that we've had is us just emailing people and being like, you want to be on our show? And so, you know, and especially for a new author that's debuting, or like they have a book, like typically we'll want to, you know, we read the book first. Our policy is like, if we can't like say anything nice about it, then we wouldn't want to promote it, only because like you worked hard on it, and just because it's not our cup of tea, like you said, someone who read it that's not their thing, like that's okay. I'm not a big fan, like some people have asked if we wanted to review their book, and it's just like, it's a misunderstanding trope, and I'm sure it's great, but I hate misunderstanding tropes. Like I hate them with a passion. So I avoid them at all costs. You know, so that's, you know, and it's just like, you know, that's just not our trope, and we wouldn't want to promote negativity with it. Like we want to promote positivity with this.
We need to convert her. Come on. Give her your Rex. Do it.
You can. I'm all for a good recommendation. Super. I don't know when this thing ends.
It's like, and we have like half an hour, I think. It goes to like 12:15.
Oh, is it?
Oh, was it
I think that's what it was, yeah.
Cool. Anybody have more questions? We'll go with you on the aisle right there, and then we'll come to you.
There was a good discussion in the writers' workshop at the beginning of the week about one way to think about being more inclusive is to do less physical description, so that the reader can see themselves in the story. And I thought that was a really, like, I've been thinking about it, and I don't know, I think it's kind of cool. I would like that as a reader, and I'm wondering, does that still write people out of stories to not give more physical descriptions? So I just thought I'd ask you guys what you just.
Funny story. I'm face blind. So.
Other authors are.
Well, thank God I'm not alone. So I see your nose, I see your eyes and mouth, but it does not stick. And in fact, if you put up, so I see general body features and how they move. And so if you put up 6 images of a middle-aged Asian woman, and one of them was my mother, I would not be able to identify her. So in my books, it's always about, the feeling whoever gets from a person, because, you know, and I have a little chart. I think I did blonde. Was it green eyes on the wheel this time? You know, I put in as little physical description as possible, because I don't remember it when I meet people. I remember, I do a lot of voice stuff because that's how I recognize people. And so, you know, the feel was, I'm just doing simple stuff, energetic or sad or happy, or it made me feel, you know, a little tingly or whatever. That's how I know people in my real life, and that's always been my books. And so there have been people who have gone, oh, I forgot he was Chinese. Like, is that good or bad? You know?
don't do that because every character I see is really specific. So I do describe them in all of my books. But so you always know what their skin color is and what their hair color is, because I just see that person and I just have to describe them. But I remember watching Shonda Rhimes, what she said one time is that when she's writing a character, she does not describe them. She does not describe their hair color, whatever. Because, well, she is writing for television and movies,
actors.
For actors. So that way, anyone can audition for that role, and the best person for that role will get it. And that's why in Grey's Anatomy, one of the characters was black when she had originally thought of them as a blonde, short blonde woman, and she turned out to be a tall black woman. But that person was that character. That actor really brought it out. So I think that's that's probably a good technique that one I cannot do, but it might work.
I think if you're writing for a BIPOC audience who has not seen themselves on the page, it is important to put them on the page. If I'm writing like this book, say that has a completely inclusive cast of all different colors, I remember my editor saying, if you're going to describe a person with brown skin, you have to describe the person with white skin as well. So you can't do any one less than the other. I think it's important to for me as a writer, I want to see the characters that I'm writing about, especially if they're a different race. It doesn't always have to be the biggest thing in the book. It might not be part of the plot. It's not an issue book. You know what I mean? I'm not talking about something that a character is going through. It just might be, that's their skin color, and that's part of the world we live in, and that's how they appear in the book, and that's it. I won't talk about it 50 billion times throughout the book unless it impacts the plot, moves it along. If I say this person, it has light brown skin, brown eyes, curly dark hair, I might mention it maybe one more time in the book, so you know who I'm referring to.
Question in the back.
I don't have a question, just comments. I want you to know I love all three of you. You're on my list of favorite authors too, and I just haven't gotten to you yet, so I will talk to you when we're done. But Jade, it's interesting. I can't even remember how I discovered your books. It never occurred to me, oh, a Chinese woman. It was just, it didn't matter. They were beautiful books by Jade Lee. Loved the characters, loved the steam, and so on. And when I talked with you the other day, Jennifer, I'm trying to remember because it's been so long, since I read your book, but the Mackenzie series, a million years ago, and love, Ian's character, and again, like you guys said, that you don't just oh boom, I fell in love, I'm all cured, everything's wonderful, but just how that evolved, and where he didn't even really recognize love at the beginning, if I remember this correctly. He's like, well, if da-da-da-da is love, then it's beautiful. And he also had some amazing steam, and I'd only found 2 of your books so far, so I'm thrilled that there are more now. It's awesome.
It's the cello. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that was kind of a long.
That was what keeps
It's okay. Every comment we all appreciate. Those are always allowed.
So appreciate it. It's just been so amazing. This is my first time here. I keep wanting to say I'm an HR virgin, but apparently I'm a debutante. And I'm 6 months later, that's probably true. I couldn't imagine being a debutante either, but it's just been so beyond my expectations, this whole thing, and to actually get to meet you all, and everyone's just like a real person. There is no sweetness.
It's a lie. It's a lie.
Thank you.
A real person?
From your experiences, is there something that you would love to write that you're not sure if you want to? I mean, you want to, but you don't. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm writing an amazing, I haven't written it yet, but I got invited. Kerrigan Byrne, who was supposed to be here, was an incredible person and writer and a great friend of mine. She is doing a Pride anthology next year, and she invited me to be part of it, so I'm going to write an FF story, and I'm really excited about it. I love Kerrigan.
Yeah,
She's amazing.
I'm going to be in the same anthology.
Yeah!
Me too. Both of us are.
Well, I'll be reading next year. It's called Pride, Not Prejudice, and it's next year.
Next year's
June,
sometime.
coming out. Well, it'd be Pride Month, so it's coming out in
Yeah.
June.
Yeah.
And
Okay, so pre-orders go up.
I'm not sure yet, but
now I know
I'm
a
also
June
going
podcast
to.
episode.
I'm also going to do an FF. There's actually, in this series, the Cat Holloway mystery series, there's two characters who are two gay women, and I'm just gonna do a little, I was like, I love those two. I'm gonna just write a little story about that. It's probably gonna be short because I don't have a lot of time, but I have the reputation for, if I think of something I wanna write about, I just do it. So, you know, and everybody hates me because I do it, but, and I'm trying to think if there's something there's stuff I really want to do. I want to write a contemporary mystery series with a male hero. I like writing male point of view, first person point of view male, because I'm now writing my Gladiator like that. I just really enjoy that. I don't know why, but I'm gonna go with it. So I haven't thought of anything that I've said absolutely I won't do it because I shouldn't. You know, I'm just gonna.
I won't do RH because I'm a super jealous person. It will never come across. I'll be like, no, I like you and you alone.
So at a certain point in our lives, you hit middle age and menopause and all of that, and my father has Alzheimer's, so we're dealing with all sorts of, you know, dementia issues. And a friend of mine, she's fine now, but when she was diagnosed with breast cancer, she just started, okay, you start thinking about how much time do I have left? So this has been very prevalent on my mind lately. And not just physical body, but, you know, Alzheimer's is hereditary, so maybe I have Alzheimer's at this point. But, okay, let's say I have only so much time left to write. If I could only write one book, what would it be? And that gets me thinking. I have random ideas that show up, but if I have a finite amount of time, if there is one idea that I am burning to write, why aren't I writing that right now? I'm not supporting my family, thank God. You know, yay, being a kept woman. So what is that one story that is burning in my gut that I've got to write? Something that is expansive and maybe cinematic, or I don't know. So I'm, you know, it's like, I've almost gotten frozen lately because if I only have so much time, what do I want? What is the thing that needs to come that only I can write? And I don't know yet. I have some ideas and they're just starting to percolate, but I've just recently got into that space and time of going, okay, I was just invited to do, you know, gay romance in the Regency, and yes, I have an idea, I have a couple ideas, but is that burning in me? Is that a story only I can write? Hint, I'm not gay. Should I even write it? And I have done gay romance, and so I understand it, but what is burning in me to say? I don't know. But next year, maybe I'll have an answer.
Yeah, all right, so you go.
Okay, I was just wondering if you guys had any recommendations. I have yet to come across a book that represents me. I have bipolar disorder, and I feel like every time I see a bipolar character, at least a hinted one, it's always a really negative, you know, they're
Autistic has really come into the literature. I agree, I haven't seen much bipolar.
Yeah, they always like they've committed suicide, they made a mess of their lives, they ruined their kids. I just didn't know if you.
No, I know I have seen one, and now I'm
I
like,
do too. I'm like,
God, what was that book? I know I have seen them out there.
Okay.
But you're right, there's not a lot. There's one or two.
I've read one, but I can't remember it right now. And it's indie, and it's well written.
I know Grace Calloway has a bipolar hero, but I haven't seen bipolar hero.
I'll even take a hero. I have yet to find that. So.
I know they're out there, so keep looking. I know they are.
I'll see if I can remember what the name
I'm gonna see if I can.
You had a question in the back?
Yeah, since you specifically mentioned the 60s and the sexuality at the time, do you think that the current environment is driving how you're able to change your writing?
Shonda has helped me enormously.
I'm kind of seeing, this may be weird, but I'm kind of seeing where people are starting to object to the too much erotic.
Clean and wholesome is
Clean and
apparently this
wholesome.
huge.
I'm seeing that a lot, so I'm thinking, well, I also think that what happens is like erotic romance got big and it kind of drove out the readers who didn't want to read that. So I think we're seeing an upsurge of people who are saying, hey, we want to read what we want to read. So
but that's for a long time, clean and wholesome was only in the Christian.
yeah.
And now there's clean and wholesome and it's mostly indie.
Yeah, and because I did a Regency series where I said, you know what, I'm just going to do a clean and wholesome Regency
tradition.
trilogy.
That's what I grew up on. It was all about the neck.
And I did that. I mean, you knew these people were going to have sex, you know, once the book closed, but it was just kind of the lead up to their relationship. So I did that, and I really enjoyed it. And I'm not saying I'm going to do another Regency series, but I just decided no, that'll be hot. So. But did that answer your question, or did I not?
I just wondered if it was more readers that are driving it versus environment.
What's coming to me? Well, so Almost a Scot is the third book in the Scott series. I was writing that when the Roe v. Wade was struck down, and I mean, I'm writing Scottish Regency. You know, it's not like Roe v. Wade is a topic in the Scottish Regency. But I ended up writing this real female empowerment, our heroine. I mean, it was like, women, let's stand up. And I put it, and so that all poured into my book, and my editor said, I don't know what you were drinking, but I love it. So it's coming in that way if you're talking like the political environment. And yeah, because I'm dealing with Alzheimer's, there's going to be a hero or heroine who's dealing with elder care with, you know, a crazy or dementia dad, because I'm guessing there was dementia historically, maybe. It's not a new disease. So that comes more, and I just pray that the reader likes it. Go with it.
Kind of going along with the whole women empowerment, the other thing we're seeing is Romeo virgins. How do you feel about that?
I was in the industry and friends with Vicki Lewis Thompson when the nerd books came out. And people know what the nerd books are? Okay, well, so all the titles, there's 6 of them, 7 of them, but I mean, they're contemporary romances where the hero was a geek or a nerd, and this was huge. And she had to fight for that first one to get released. And even when the sales were really good because they exploded, she still had to fight her editor. Her editor told her, look, I'm sorry, but it's not a romance unless, and she admitted it's not a romance for her. It's not a romance unless the male is more sexually experienced than the female. And, you know, I'm happy that we're getting more male virgins, but that is really entrenched in the romance industry still today, I think.
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about modern terms, like the women, like I like on female agency and stuff like that. I like the reverse. I like being, you know, I'm like a, you know, alpha outside of the bedroom.
I actually, when I first started writing romance, I wrote a male virgin in the Regency. He was, I can't remember why he was a virgin, but maybe he promised his mother or something. But and I really liked
I actually
that
think
book.
he did. I think he did. He promised his mother.
Well, I never published it.
Oh.
So you don't know.
Okay. It was somebody else's book then. That he promised his mother.
It probably was. But yeah, I wrote that a male virgin, and the woman was a courtesan, and they got to. It was. I love this story, and I forgot to write it. But and that was like my first book I ever submitted, and everyone was like, "No, you can't do that. You can't." I got a lot of that when I first started. You can't do that. You can't do that, and that just drove me bananas. So that's why I kind of am a rebel now. But yeah, and yes, it has gotten more, and I think that's really cool because I'm all for women being, you know.
I like all the lines being kind of smudged, right? Yeah. Saying that it's not a romance because a guy isn't, you know, the leader in the romantic relationship is just like
Jamie in Outlander. Isn't he a virgin?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
And you know, that little book Outlander, I don't know.
Yeah.
I know, it's really weird. It's like a lot of the stuff I wanted to do, I hadn't read Outlander, but you know, I was like, I want to do this because that was like back before Outlander came out. So that's how long ago that was. But the things I wanted to do, people say, you can't do that, you can't do that. And then Outlander came out and she did all that. And then they were like, oh wow, but that's her. You can't do that. And it's like, that's so bizarre. I don't understand.
Well, she hadn't read romance before. She just submitted
wrote
a historical
what she wanted to write.
time travel
I
weird
think
thing.
she said that she doesn't think it's romance.
No.
right?
She says
Yeah, she said it's not romance, yeah.
Yeah, and Jamie was younger too. It was,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of they call it younger man, older woman.
Ooh, yum.
Any other questions?
I guess it's not really a question, but a comment that I'm, as an author who writes weird things, like it's really nice to hear from you guys talking about the struggles that you've had about having the mainstream publishing say no thank you to you so many times because of trying to tell a different kind of story. So I really appreciate hearing those and also hearing about the successes that you have found now in different avenues, writing the things that are part of your heart.
The one thing I was shocked at as I was coming up is all these women with 40, 50, 80, 100 books. I would go to them and go, God, but you're, amazing. And they said, people think I don't get rejected. And I had a long talk with Eileen Dreyer about how many times she had to start over in her career. And, even Nora will talk about that. And that you just, it's a career of heart and really great joys and really devastating. Life is
It's like
this
roller
way.
coaster, man.
Yeah,
It really is.
It's very much of a
I also did the off the track on Monday and Tuesday. Sabrina Jeffries talked about when she got dropped by her publisher and she had to get a day job because they weren't going to be able to keep the family going until she could find a new publisher.
I had 3 traditional publishers that got rid of their YA imprints in 2014. 3. And I was like, oh, what do I do now?
I started in traditional regencies.
But keep going. Keep writing your
Yeah.
stories.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's self-published.
And
that's
some
been
of
really
the books that I'm like, okay, I'm writing this because it's fun and whatever. You get surprising results, and even if that book doesn't take off, it helps you grow as an author. You grow as an artist. If you're not expanding yourself as an artist, you're growing stale.
Yeah, I always say that no writing is wasted. Even if you can't sell that book or you don't even finish that book, every book you write grows you. It teaches you something new. It teaches you how to, not make a mistake you made before. Every book advances you, so no writing is ever wasted.
Thank God.
So continuing from what you just said, can you speak to which of your books taught you the most, or some, or a book that was particularly meaningful to you in some way?
There have been books that I've written that are like really, really hard. And one was not a historical, it was a paranormal. It's called The Gathering. And it was part of a multi-author series, and I had to write the closing book. It was an adventure series, and at the end, they all had to gang up against the bad guy, and I had to take everybody's characters, including mine, and put them all together and get them to the bad guy. And that was really hard. That was one of the hardest books I ever wrote, but it taught me a lot. And now I look back and I go, why did I think that book was hard? I've written harder things, but yeah, I've had several that I've said, if I can write this, I can write anything. And that it helps you grow your confidence. If you can finish something, even if, nobody else likes it, it's still, everything kind of advances you.
I think I'm learning as every book that I write, I kind of learn something. Like I have a book coming out in November with Source Bus. It's called The the Duke in question, and I remember I was doing a sensitivity read for it. I mean, sensitivity reads are important because sometimes even if you're writing in your own sort of lane, I hate saying lane, in your own, representing your own culture or space, you might get something wrong, and you know, it's good to kind of address that before it gets into any steamroll territory. But like, I had this scene where the characters, and one is biracial, one is white, and they were dancing together with a bunch of very mixed group of people, and the sensitivity reader was like, well, why do you have them dancing in this part of the ship? You know, this is like the bottom of the ship. And I was thinking Titanic, right? I love that scene where they're downstairs and they're having the thing. But when you add people of color into that scene, it adds a different nuance to it. So I had to think about it, and then I read some other books, and one of the books I read was Eating the Other, and it's just about, you know, Black culture and BIPOC culture and how they're seen by other people. So like I had to move it, and when I moved it, even when I was reading it back, I was like, oh, well, this reads a lot better because there's less, you don't look down on it. It's not like a lower level. There's all these other things that come into play when you're writing about a marginalized group. And even myself as a marginalized group, I mean, I was informed by that. So, I mean, we're all learning as we go. I think I am, anyway, as writers. It's difficult, but you know, you just do the work.
Over time, there is never a book that doesn't have a hard spot. There's always, every book, there's some place that you just want to die. And there are some books with the whole fucking thing. You just, oh God, kill me now.
Now she said the F word is coming out all the time. She broke it. We got like 5 minutes, so I'm going to get as many F words out.
The discipline of being able to fall back on technique and saying, okay, and you know, it doesn't matter if it's your day life that is killing you or your sex life that's, whatever, you know, whatever is making this book hard, get through it, whatever it takes. If you're bribing yourself with chocolate, if you're bribing your kids with chocolate, whatever, and they end up being, I mean, sometimes the books are spectacularly beautiful because they were so hard. Sometimes not so much. But the discipline and the strength of when, please, just kill me now, and you still sit down and do the work. And I remember there were books that I decided, okay, I'm going to really work on being funny and expanding my just really doing more comedy in my books. Get up, take care of the kids. They're teenagers, they're snotty ass shits. Get them out of the house. Get your cup of coffee. Now be funny. Fuck you. I sat, because of a deadline, I sat in my mother-in-law's living room trying to write a love scene going, oh God, kill me now. Whatever you can do. You can fix a bad page. I hope. Get it done.
You can't fix a blank page.
You can't fix a blank page. You can fix a bad page. Again, I mean, also a myth. There have been times when no, can't fix that. And
that's when wine happens.
And wine with the H happens.
Anything else? All right, cool. Well, we're a couple minutes early, but thank you all for Thank you for
buy our books.
coming. Yeah, buy their books. Support authors.
I'd like to caveat and say that I do love my son. Okay.
It is yours. It is